buck stops here and I'm Barkhadat. On the program this evening, the big story. It's a historic judgment from the Supreme Court and one that probably has politicians across party lines anxious this evening. The Supreme Court has restrained political parties, state governments and the central government from using taxpayers' money to print advertisements which encourage the personality cult of political leaders. The court has ordered that apart from the Prime Minister, the President and the Chief Justice of India, no political personality can be represented in advertisements that have been paid with taxpayers' money. In other words, advertisements that are publicly funded. The restraining order on political parties and governments also applies to party symbols and even links to websites of political parties. Now remember, political parties are free to use their own party funds to advertise just like any private player would. This, of course, is about publicly funded ads that use your and mine money. Is this judgment a welcome development in ending the egoism and the political machinations of parties at our expense, or is this the judiciary going too far and infringing on the rights of the executive? Let's introduce our panel this evening. Joining us is Senior Advocate Prashant Bhushan, who was also the key petitioner in this case. We're also joined from the BJP by Sambit Patra, the spokesperson of the party. With me in the studio, Jaiveer Shergill, spokesperson with the Congress party. We're also joined from Bhubaneswar today by Jai Panda, Member of Parliament with the BJD, and Pavan Verma, Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament with the JDU. Remember, regional parties in particular may have problems with this verdict as it allows the depiction of the Prime Minister but not of any chief ministers. Prashant Bhushan, how do you see the verdict and why is it significant?
I think it's a very welcome and significant judgment, because this business of misusing public funds by way of government advertising or advertising by public sector corporations in order to derive political mileage and project political personalities by publishing large photographs of various political personalities and even public officials. This had reached alarming proportions. We were seeing sort of full-page or half-page advertisements being published in newspapers containing essentially photographs of various political personalities and public officials, etc. Yeah. And this was a gross misuse. Even advertisements congratulating the Prime Minister or even various other persons on their birthdays, etc. It had gone to an absurd extent.
But what do you think of the exemptions, Prashant? Prashant, what do you think of the exemptions that have been made by the court? Now, the committee actually said in certain cases even chief ministers and governors should be permitted in states. The Supreme Court said no to that. But it's created an exemption for the President, the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice of India. Some may ask in particular why the Chief Justice of India?
Yeah, I think the objection should be more to the Prime Minister. I think that's a bit of an anomaly in this judgment, because on the same principle by which other political personalities were not permitted or their photographs were not permitted, the Prime Minister's photograph also should not have been permitted. One can understand that the President is head of the state, he is not really involved in direct active politics, or the Chief Justice is also not interested in deriving any partisan political advantage out of the publication of their photographs. But Prime Minister, certainly an anomaly, should not have been allowed. But the Supreme Court has said that in case the photographs of the Prime Minister, President or Chief Justice are published, they must personally themselves give consent for the publication of their photographs in any advertisement. We hope that this will be a sufficient deterrent by way of discouraging such people to allow the use of their photographs. If it is still misused by the Prime Minister, etc., then of course we will be forced to approach the court again to stop this anomaly also.
Sambit Patra, let me ask you. Prashant Bhushan says that the exemption to the Prime Minister's name on this is an anomaly and it gives an unfair political advantage to the Prime Minister. The BJP, or the Attorney General at least, in court argued that this was an infringement of the rights of the executive, the autonomy of the executive. Now that the verdict is in, do you welcome it? How do you see it?
No, Barkha, I mean, definitely it is a Supreme Court verdict, and all the political parties and every individual in this country will definitely respect the Supreme Court verdict. But having said that, we all definitely will also have a say into what this verdict is all about. And since the Attorney General has also contested this in the court, there are a few technical points which I can only explain. As far as the photograph of the concerned politician on the advertisement is concerned, there were three things that the Attorney General had put into the Supreme Court's bench. That was one, that the use of such photos may be resorted to serve the objective of advertisement campaign or to serve the purpose of propagating the message.
Yes.
And second would be to establish the authenticity of the message. And third, the answerability of the public personality to the electorate or the public office he or she is holding. So I believe as far as authenticity of the message is concerned, as far as propagation of the message is concerned in the best possible way, and as far as the answerability of the particular political person, be it the minister or any public office holding position is concerned, I believe these 3 points were the best points kept by the government.
But the Attorney General's arguments were not accepted, Sambit. The fact of the matter is that the Supreme Court has only allowed 3 exceptions, and in the case of deceased leaders, whether it Mahatma Gandhi or former prime ministers, it has said that there can only be a single advertisement, not that multiple ministries are publishing photographs of Rajiv Gandhi or Indira Gandhi, for example. Let me get in Jaiveer, and I'll take it back to you, Sambit, in a moment from now. Jaiveer, in many ways, because we do not have the funding figures for how the BJP has used its public funds yet, so we have one figure for the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. The main culprit, the main offender is actually seen to be the Congress and the UPA years. And I have the figures before me. The UPA government spent nearly 143 crores to commemorate birth and death anniversaries of 15 leaders between 2008 and 2013. 143 crores. It further spent 187 crores on Bharat Nirman publicity campaigns in 2013 to 2014. And it goes on like this. 58 crores according to an NDTV RTI application between 2008 and 2011 on just birth and death anniversaries. So these are staggering figures. Is the Congress embarrassed today?
Of course, these are staggering figures, and I think this disease, if I may candidly call it, spreads across all political class. And I remember.
But I'm glad you're calling it a disease, because it is about egoism and personality cult and well, frankly, political propaganda.
Supreme Court addresses this problem. It says the propaganda and a genuine message, the line is blurred today. The political class has blurred this line itself.
Yeah.
Now, as far as this judgment is concerned, now, Congress party, we have a mixed feeling. We are happy, we are also disappointed.
Why?
Happy because, you know, these overzealousness of departments to commemorate an anniversary, or this pictorial domination was practically cocking a snook at taxpayers' money. It was a much needed corrective measure. We have a guideline, DAVP guidelines. It needed more fill in the gaps or the fill in the blanks. That was done. Now, why we are disappointed? We talk, India is a union of states. Day in and day out, we talk about cooperative federalism.
Yeah.
Now, either the Supreme Court should have put elected representative class altogether out or altogether in. Now, as far as head of state is concerned,
you can't allow the Prime Minister but not allow Chief Ministers.
Absolutely. Because just sorry, I mean, because there are some central schemes which Prime Minister puts up. There are certain state-sponsored schemes. Now, why deprive the states of that benefit which you are extending to the Prime Minister?
Okay, you're saying that either the Prime Minister should have been excluded as well.
Yes, altogether.
Okay, Jay, Panda and Pawan Verma, let me get a sense from the states of that. Jay, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I have 3 things to say. First of all, I think there has been quite a bit of resistance that's been building up to government money being spent on advertising for political purposes, or having dual purposes, advertising a government scheme and also having a political angle to it. So in that sense, this was sort of becoming overdue, and the court judgment will be welcomed by many millions of Indians. But as has been raised by some other panelists, we have to have some logic and rationale about why something is done. Now, if you have the head of government and the head of state and the head of the judiciary, you have to then wonder why the head of the legislatures, the speaker and the vice president, are excluded. And similarly, if you have the head of government at the national level, as has just been said, why not the head of government at the state level? So overall, I think I welcome the principle behind the judgment, but I think it does suffer from some inconsistencies which do need to get sorted out.
So you're saying, Jay, the philosophy behind it is welcome, but it's a discriminatory judgment.
No, even the philosophy behind it has to be weighed in balance, because look, you can't completely ban all government advertising which showcases the Prime Minister or a Chief Minister, because it is actually the government's responsibility to get certain messages about certain schemes and plans, health benefits, etc. to poor citizens. So that's important, and you can't completely ban it. At the same time, I think everybody will agree that for several years, several decades, this was being misused in a very blatant manner, and it did need some correction.
Yeah.
Now, so the principle of the judgment is something I welcome, but the inconsistencies need to be sorted out, both between the center and state, and also at the center itself. You know, the constitution consists of 3 pillars.
Yeah.
Why are heads of 2 pillars included and not the heads of the 3rd pillar?
I think that's a fair question. And Pawan, do you want to add to that? And then I'll take it back to Prashant and Sambit on this. That is there a sense in the states that this is an unfair political advantage? Today it's Narendra Modi, as I said, tomorrow somebody else could be the Prime Minister. Are we going to see political parties actually ganging up to take on the verdict through the legislative route?
No, let me just make 3 quick points. First of all, there is no doubt, as other panelists have said, that we have seen an excess in terms of the money spent by executives, either in the state or at the center, political executives, using government money, using taxpayers' money to promote themselves under the garb of communicating with their people. Let's accept that. My query really is that if there is to be a corrective in this, whether the Supreme Court is the right forum, I welcome the judgment in some aspects.
Okay.
Because ultimately now we are in a situation where the only corrective is provided by the Supreme Court.
Okay.
But it could have been done, I think, by an all-party meeting, by the Election Commission giving a nudge, by all political parties themselves moderating this down.
But then nobody would listen.
The third point is
but Pawan,
that
nobody would listen. The EC, nobody would listen.
That's what I'm saying. That's why we have to. That's why we have to rely on the. No, that's why we need to rely on the Supreme Court. But I'm saying normally the correct forum should have been within the executive as itself a sense of self-introspection, moderation, and restraint. The third point is that in Barkha, you will understand, in a democracy, chief ministers are elected and often by huge constituencies. Now they need to communicate with their people.
Yeah.
They have funds for this purpose. These funds are audited.
Yeah.
And they are for schemes, etc., which have got legislative sanction.
Yes.
Now, when you completely say that this kind of messaging cannot happen, and then single out from that the President, the Chief Justice, and most, from my point of view, it is certainly an anomaly, the Prime Minister, because the Prime Minister heads a political party also. Of course, he is the Prime Minister of the country, but states will put out ads of achievements, and instead of the Chief Minister, put the photograph of the Prime Minister.
It's a very good question. I want Sambit to respond to it.
Behind
Sambit,
principle is good. There are problems here.
Sambit, the perception...
And I can say that Nitish Kumar has been very reticent in using such money. Why have all states been clubbed or all leaders been clubbed in one category?
Sambit, do you accept that the inclusion of the Prime Minister is a contradiction in this verdict? That tomorrow in the BJP-ruled states, for example, Mr. Modi's pictures could be used to propagate a government scheme, but no other Chief Minister will ever get any play from at least public funds. It would have to be the funds of the political party. So do you see that as a contradiction, Sambit?
Rather than thinking as to how the other political parties will gang up to see whether the name of the Prime Minister is dropped or not, I believe the political parties should gang up for the contrary, that they should see to it that the Governor and the Chief Ministers are included, which was the original suggestion in the Menon Committee report. The original suggestion was that the Chief Minister and the Governor should also be a part of the ones whose photo can be used, which was dropped by the Supreme Court. But the second point again is, whether it be the picture of the Prime Minister, the President, or the CJI of India, each one of them have to give the prior permission to the publishing house for getting their pictures used.
Yes.
So thereafter, there are a number of checks and balances in all of these. And as far as the government's Attorney General view was concerned, it was absolutely clear, where I had already read out the answer that the Attorney General had given, that there should be no restriction on this, and for the propagation of the message, to establish the authenticity of the message, and for the answerability of the legislators, which Mr. Pawan Verma was right now mentioning, that since legislative process is a huge process and which every legislator has an answerability to the electorate which has elected him or her, definitely that should allow the pictures of the legislator, which was the stand of the Attorney General, but the court took a contrarian view.
I want to get Prashant, who was the petitioner in this case. Prashant, you yourself acknowledged that the inclusion of the Prime Minister and the exclusion of Chief Ministers is a political contradiction, irrespective of who occupies those posts. But I think Pawan and Jay also raise a deeper question, that can you be so puritanical so as to blank out Chief Minister's faces from government schemes? Tomorrow, if you want the Prime Minister also removed, are we really saying that the Prime Minister cannot appear? The Prime Minister of India cannot appear in any advertisement for a public policy, even though it might be his creation? For example, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, when it comes to Narendra Modi. Is this not taking it too far, is what I'm hearing from this panel?
You see, the issue that has to be examined is what is the public interest sought to be furthered by putting the photograph of a political leader along with a government advertisement. The purpose of the advertisement is to convey some information to the people about some government scheme, some government policy, etc., or any other relevant information.
Yeah.
Now that information, there is no public interest to be served by carrying a photograph of a political leader or even the Prime Minister or a Chief Minister or any minister of the then government.
But Prashant, tomorrow it could be argued that Doordarshan is publicly funded, so the Prime Minister should never appear on Doordarshan because that's also a kind of political propagation. So where do we draw the line in this?
No. The question is, if the Prime Minister is in some public function, etc., which is of public interest, then certainly that event can be shown. The question is, do you necessarily need to have the photograph of the Prime Minister or any other minister, etc., in any government advertisement which is for the purpose of conveying some information to the people? That information can be perfectly well conveyed without having the photographs of these ministers or these political leaders. In fact, the Supreme Court originally first gave an earlier judgment 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, in which they said, they held this proposition that, look, there has been misuse of advertisements for projecting political personalities, for deriving political advantage, etc. This needs to be curbed. But exactly how it needs to be curbed needs to be decided by an expert committee. So an expert committee headed by Professor Madhav Menon was made. They gave their recommendation.
But Madhav Menon's committee did argue that chief ministers and governors could be permitted. Now, Jaiveer and Sambit, I want you to come in. Jaiveer, do you accept that the Congress has, in a sense, created this culture of excess? That the whole thing of naming every scheme after Rajiv Gandhi and Indira Gandhi, every ministry bending over backwards on birth and death anniversaries of these two leaders. We're not talking about Mahatma Gandhi or B.R. Ambedkar or even Jawaharlal Nehru here. There was a sense that the Congress was using taxpayers' money for the propagation of one dynasty.
Barkha, I'll answer your question, but before that, on a lighter note, I think this judgment suits Mr. Modi, as you pointed out. Even in the BJP-ruled states...
Or whoever's Prime Minister next.
Even in BJP ruled states, he doesn't like his own Chief Minister's pictures, he likes his own pictures.
Now that you have made the whole thing political, wait for my answer.
And as you said, you filed an RTI, I remember that categorically. After then, our party president, Srimati Sonia Gandhi, wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. Please stop this ostentatious display on these samadhis. So we did take a corrective measure. Third, to what Mr. Prashant Bhushan is saying, this is Indian politics. You cannot divorce a political party from a government, or a government from a political party, or a leader from a political party. So I am a believer that chief minister's pictures should be there. Elections are fought at the ground with the party, with the personality also. You have to broadcast your achievements.
Sambit, come in there, that this judgment suits Mr. Modi.
No, the problem is, this judgment was because of the fact that money was spent like water by a particular political party just in order to showcase a particular family and leave aside just advertisements, go around this country.
Please, in 8 months on your mission.
Let me complete. Let me complete, sir, let me complete. So just just in order to bolster the image of a particular family, most of this amount has been used. And I'm sure if the CAG was to audit this whole thing, it would point out that Gandhi family's advertisement was the prime purpose of all this. So go around this country and you will find that half the buildings and half the roads in this country are named after a particular family. But then, as Jai Panda rightly pointed out, millions of people in this country would be happy today because some amount of money of the taxpayer would be saved by this judgment. But having said this, definitely if the Supreme Court has taken this view, even after the submission by the Menon Committee report, that the chief ministers and the governors should have been allowed, and this was the submission of the government as well, then it is best left to the wisdom of the Supreme Court.
But are you all going to challenge this or find a way around this through the legislative route?
That was the last statement I was going to say, that I, as a spokesperson of a political party, would not be able to preempt what the stand of the government would be.
Let me get Jay and Pavan in. Are we going to see political unanimity that this verdict needs to be challenged or altered in some way, Jay?
Look, clearly, as I said, there are some inconsistencies, and other panelists have also pointed out. You can't have one set of principles applying to the center and another set of principles applying to the state. So I think there has to be some corrective action that will take place. But let me say this. I think broadly a lot of people, including politicians, will actually welcome this move. The only people who might not are other ministers and all, who will not get to put their pictures out in the papers. But lots of the public will welcome it. But at the same time, we must use common sense. Let me give you an example to show how absurd this can become. Now here we are talking about photographs. Sambit has just talked about how names have been used to build a personality cult based on government projects. So what are we going to do next? Are we going to say that plaques at inaugurations of buildings which show that so-and-so minister or MP or somebody went and inaugurated it will no longer be allowed? Do we say that tweets from official handles of the government will not mention which minister went and did something that is of relevance to the public because it will build his or her personality cult? I mean, there has to be some commonsensical application of the law and not just take it to absurd limits.
Prashant Bhushan, respond to that, and then Pavan, you can come in. That there are too many contradictions in this verdict, that there are many other ways that ministers or politicians promote themselves at taxpayers' expense. So how many things are you going to police? And to the point made by both Pavan and Jay, was there another way to do this? An all-party meeting, an election commission mandate? Should the judiciary be getting involved in these decisions?
Well, the parties are not willing to do anything to curb this. This petition was filed in 2003. It's been pending for the last 12 years. All the political parties and successive governments were aware that there is a petition in the Supreme Court seeking to stop the political abuse and misuse of public funds for projecting political personalities. No party was willing to stop this. Just as you are hearing all these representatives of political parties who are saying that how far will you take this, etc. We need to take it further than this. This is only the beginning. I am glad that the Supreme Court today has...
What do you mean by further? Give an example of taking it further.
Yes. Using the names of these political personalities on plaques, etc. of public buildings, to my mind, is also an abuse of public funds and abuse of their authority. This should also be stopped. You see, in this country, there has been rampant misuse and abuse of public funds, public authority.
So you're saying naming government schemes or putting plaques on buildings after politicians who are alive or politicians who are no longer alive? Yes. Are you making an exception?
Even
what about Mahatma Gandhi or
politicians
Ambedkar?
Who are alive, certainly. Mahatma Gandhi or Ambedkar stand on a different footing. They are, in a certain sense, non-partisan personalities.
Okay.
But when you have partisan political personalities and people are rampantly abusing their authority to name schemes, to name roads, to put plaques on public buildings, etc., in the names of existing partisan political personalities, etc., this is also an abuse of authority, abuse of public funds, etc.
Let me get Pavan, and I'm already hearing JV say who's to decide. Who's to decide? Now, Pavan, you're hearing Prashant Bhushan, the petitioner in the case, saying this is only the tip of the iceberg.
Now, Barkha, I feel that because there were perhaps excesses in the past, which were wrong and were resented, I don't believe the pendulum should swing to the other extreme without some degree, as Jay said, of commonsensical thinking or balance in the whole matter. I believe, this is my personal view, that while the spirit of the Supreme Court judgment is to be welcomed, perhaps guidelines given to all political parties and leaders and chief ministers and government would have been served the purpose, because a mandatory order of this nature which excludes democratically elected chief ministers who preside over very large states and have things to sell their people.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit abrupt and in my view, and the other thing, Barkha, is I think Prashant will agree that this needs to be thought out. You don't put a photo and you put a full page ad in great praise of that leader and put in a photo just next door with party funds.
Yeah.
So you used a full page on government money. So, these kind of fiats, while they are welcome, I'm sure the Supreme Court is well-intentioned.
Prashant is agreeing with you that that should also be stopped.
Supreme Court is well-intentioned.
He is agreeing with you that that should also be stopped.
But I'm saying that my only point, Barkha, is, and I appeal on this to Prashant also, that if you are going to have some kind of solution to the excesses in this field, let there be a comprehensive judgment which lays down broad guidelines rather than a surgical cut-off.
Okay.
Which is also partial because it includes the Prime Minister.
Okay, Jay, go ahead. The point is, would this judgment have been more acceptable had chief ministers and governors, and actually I'm not sure why governors, okay, you can argue constitutional post, fine, but had chief ministers been included, would there have been no political debate? Because Prashant is actually saying, hang on, this is not enough.
Well, I'm sure... Well, look, I'm sure this case will likely be challenged, and it has certain inconsistencies which are going to be, I'm sure, will have to be heard again. But I agree with Mr. Bhushan that political parties have not acted on this. And it's not only on this. On many issues, political parties and politicians have given up space which they ought to be handling, which is why the court has, many people say this is judicial overreach, but I think, there's a vacuum. If politicians don't take action, the judiciary will take action. But let me again say that this is not a peculiar Indian phenomenon. Now, yes, there have been excesses and it needed to be corrected. A lot of people will welcome this. I welcome the principle of what has happened today. But, look at Washington, D.C. You have Reagan National Airport. You go to any of the big buildings. They have been inaugurated and they have plaques commemorating which politician inaugurated them. Same thing in the UK, same thing in Europe, same thing in China, all over the world. It's not a peculiar Indian phenomenon. We do have to apply some common sense because people are in public life to be in public, not to be hiding. But it is a peculiar Indian phenomenon to name scheme after one dominant political family, Javeer.
No, Barkha, I think I agree. I disagree with Mr.
I agree.
Bhushan.
So the excesses, I think everybody's talking about everything. Everybody's talking about the excesses which needed to be corrected. Nobody's arguing against that.
With Mr.
But to say that politicians, public figures ought not to be in the public is odd.
Okay, last comment from all of you, Javeer.
I disagree with Mr. Prashant Bhushan. But
on what? On what specifically?
You cannot have such a fine line. We are in 2014. Yes, we respect Mahatma Gandhi, we respect B.R. Ambedkar. But in 2080, there will be certain other figures. You can't have a fine line barring them.
Well, I'm actually seeing behind Pavan Verma. We can just bring him up. Hang on, because to what you said, Pavan, behind you is that Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, I think, just right behind you, the photograph. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting what Prashant says. He considers one half of that photograph to be non-partisan. I'm not sure if he'd say the same about Nehru. So who's drawing these lines?
And Barkha, it's very unfair on Mr. Bhushan to paint the political class with it. I am a lawyer myself. You go across judicial courts, unnumbered chambers, libraries, welfare funds are applied. Please apply the same test to judiciary.
What are they named after?
Who are libraries out of welfare funds. You go to the Chief Justice's Code, we have the pictures of our legal stalwarts there. Now, if we don't believe in iconization or apply the same test, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
Prashant, respond to that. Why is the Chief Justice's name there? What about what happens within the judiciary? Is no institution free from the personality cult?
You see, here there are two issues. One is the misuse or abuse of public funds for the purpose of projecting political personalities, for the purpose of deriving a partisan advantage. One aspect is the misuse of public funds. The other aspect is giving an unfair political advantage to the party in power merely because they have control over the government. They can use public funds for deriving political advantage, which does not leave a level playing field for the political parties. So both kinds of abuse are happening. Now, in the case of libraries being named after judges who are no more, etc., or their portraits being hung in the walls of the court, etc., there is no misuse of any kind. I mean, there is no political advantage being derived by people.
It's not about political propaganda, Javed. Quickly, then I have to start taking last comments. That a judge's photograph on the wall does not promote any particular entity, whereas when you see political leaders associated with the party, even if they're not alive anymore, it is propaganda. At the end of the day, it is propaganda.
No, apart from the propaganda, I disagree. I see it as a balance of power. I, as a taxpayer, don't have the right. The bigger problem is that how and my money is being used by the government. Here is my taxpayer's problem. My money is being used on a picture and advertisement. I would like to be used in a school. I have no power on that. Similarly, same applies to judiciary. I'm a lawyer. I have contributed to a welfare fund. I don't have power where my money is being used as a taxpayer in a similar manner. So the balance of power shifts. I think apart from the propaganda, then this problem should also be addressed.
Okay, Pavan, this construct of Prashant, that some leaders are bipartisan or non-partisan. Mahatma Gandhi, B.R. Ambedkar is something we can all agree on today. But others are not. Who's to decide? 40 years down the road...
No, it's like this, Barkha.
I mean, for example, Vajpayee's Bharat Ratna. Let me give you an example. Vajpayee's Bharat Ratna was welcomed across parties. So, over time, somebody who was once associated with one party, over time becomes larger than that party.
No, in fact, I wanted to raise this question because we are an ancient civilization but a young republic. There is to be an iconization of those who gave us our independence, fought for our freedom movement, laid the foundation of our constitution. The other thing is that you are not excluding leaders of political parties who may not be alive today, but in whose name many schemes run. And they also represent in public memory a certain political party. So I'm just saying that this very sort of almost arbitrary categorization made, 3 people allowed, the rest excluded. I don't believe it examines the situation in all its ramifications. And it's certainly, while welcoming the spirit of the judgment, unfair to chief ministers.
Prashant, last thoughts. Do you believe this verdict will stand the test of scrutiny? We've already pointed out a number of contradictions in this very program itself.
No, I think on the whole, it will certainly withstand the scrutiny. As I said, I see only one anomaly in this judgment as it presently stands, and that is allowing the Prime Minister's photograph to be used. But there they have said that the Prime Minister must personally give his approval for the use of his photograph in any government advertisement where it is used. Now let us see whether the Prime Minister has the courage and is willing to take the responsibility of allowing his photograph to be used in government advertisements. If it is abused, I am sure that the matter will go back to court again to prevent this abuse as well. So far as the other issue is concerned, as to who are partisan, who are non-partisan dead leaders, etc., if a political party continues to lay claim to a particular dead leader as a person representing their party or as a leader of their party, then certainly in my view, his photograph cannot be used, or his photograph cannot be, public funds cannot be allowed to be used.
Supreme Court answers that. I'm sorry, there's a contradiction. Supreme Court in para, it says, why are we interfering? Because this is Chapter 4 of the Constitution. The executive, the judiciary and legislature are equally responsible for maintaining.
But do you agree with this definition? Do you agree with this definition of Atal Bihari Vajpayee will always be a BJP leader, Jawaharlal Nehru will always be a Congress leader, but does that mean that they will be seen as partisan leaders? Pavan and Jay, last thoughts I have to end. Pavan.
No, I don't believe that Mahatma Gandhi, for instance, part of the background I have, or even Jawaharlal Nehru as our first Prime Minister so far down in history now, I don't believe they are necessarily partisan leaders. But there can be leaders of more recent vintage who are venerated and respected in the country, who will have an association with a political party.
Okay.
And their photographs can be used to convey a similar message. So I'm saying this needs to be looked at afresh.
Okay, Jay, you get the last word.
Yes, well, there are very clear contradictions in what's being said. So let's take Sardar Patel. He was obviously a congressman and the Congress claimed him for many decades. Now the BJP seems to be claiming him. Yeah. So is he bipartisan or not? In Odisha, my party is named after the late Biju Patnaik. Today, other parties are trying to claim Biju Patnaik's legacy when they want to bring about certain developmental schemes. And which politician will work for decades for their pet projects, railways or something else, dams, power plants, and expect not to be associated with it at all when the time comes for it to be shown to the public? There has to be some commonsensical middle ground we have to find, but the excesses had to be corrected, so that's in the right direction.
All right, we leave it there. Very many questions.
Barkha, just one thing.
Okay. Yes, Prashant.
This is only about the use and misuse of government funds by way of government advertising.
Yes.
The parties are free to project political personalities, their own icons, etc., through the use of their advertisements and their
government funds.
The question is whether government funds can be used for all this.
Okay, I've seen that.
Should we encourage private funding, you will encourage more black money coming into politics.
All right, as you can see, I have a sense that this verdict is not the last word on this debate, and you may see more unanimity in the political class than on most issues, but I can tell you, ordinary citizens are looking at this and saying, it's a good thing that my money is not being wasted to promote one or the other politician. But yes, indeed, the point is taken that there has to be consistency in the model that we create in a level playing field for all. We'll leave it there. Prashant Bhushan, Jaiveer Shergill, Sambit Patra, who had to leave the program early, Jay Panda, Pawan Verma, thank you so much for joining us on the Buck Stops here.